Well, the Prime Minister sending out a political message there. But joining us now is former Revenue Secretary and Chairperson of the 15th Finance Commission, Mr. NK Singh. Sir, thanks very much for speaking to us. There's a universal acknowledgement that this is a move on the right track. P. Chidambaram, of course, saying it's 8 years too late. What are your key areas of concerns, if any, and highlights otherwise, which states, some states are fearing a revenue shortfall? What compensation mechanisms are perhaps needed to ensure that federal trust doesn't break down?
So there are multiple questions which are embedded in one omnibus question of yours, if I may say so. So let me begin with the positives. I think that it is widely appreciated. I heard towards the end, I heard the former finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram, also speak, and I took note of what he was saying, except that, all honesty, I think that Mr. Chidambaram would be the first to concede that the idea of the GST was mooted in 1991 as part of the economic reforms of 1991. If you see the leftover notes left by of that period, you will see that we moved over. Chidambaram is very well aware of a unified mod VAT and so on. But right up to the time of Prime Minister Modi, they did not have the ability to garner support with the states to be able to enact the far-reaching legislation in which the states have voluntarily submerged and subsumed their financial sovereignty to this new organ and entity, the GST Council. So this is the first thing that it is, I think it's Prime Minister Modi period when the GST commenced. That's the first thing. Second, it commenced in a manner which it took some time to get calibrated. It's all right to say that they took 8 years, but they could not even start the GST during that period. So in 8 years, we have made substantial progress to achieve the objective, which we did yesterday in a very far-reaching recalibration of the GST. Consider the items of the number of items on which there is zero GST. These are all items of mass consumption, on which people were paying money, directly enhances their consumption, it directly enhances the income of the segment which really needed and deserved to be supported. Simplifications of other rates is a direct benefit to startups, to MSEBs, enhancing income, and all the growth multipliers which were there. You asked the last question, namely that do I fear that there will be shortfalls? What are compensating mechanisms which are needed for the states? Let me say that three very brief comments. First of all, which is important, is that if you would have watched yesterday's press interview, the finance minister and the revenue secretary intervened to say that it's difficult to say because it's difficult to predict and project likely revenue buoyancy. I believe that the enhanced consumption, enhanced income and growth will really lead to a revenue buoyancy where both the central government and the state governments would benefit, and that it is a very, very narrow suboptimal interpretation that the elasticity of demand on account of the reduction in the tax rates would be so grossly inadequate to require this. But I think this is for the future. The most important thing is this is one of the biggest growth-enhancing measures in recent times.
But Mr. Singh, there's this concern that this new two-slab GST structure, of course, could broaden compliance and also improve ease of doing business, which has been a priority for the government. We all heard about that Pillar 3. But do you think that small traders, do they risk getting left behind?
No. I think that the fact that GST has been reduced to zero, as I said, in multiple items, if they want to be part of the input chain, they can, of course, begin, if their turnover justifies, at the very base level where it's next to minimal. So I think that there is a win-win for everyone. There's a win-win for you, for me. We go to our table and see the items which are now coming tax-free. I do not see that fear. Rather, I see a growth multiplier a robust response to the need to project India to a growth trajectory which is needed. Take the 6.5 to 7.58%, on which all the assumptions are predicated. Tax reforms on income tax, a far-reaching reform, if you recall, was done by the finance minister in the last budget. Earlier than that, if you remember, even during the pandemic, it was Prime Minister Modi who converted that challenge into an opportunity. The current international situation enjoins upon us to grasp this opportunity, to bring about qualitative changes and enhance the comparative efficiency of the Indian economy.
Right.
Be able to have a growth rate which is necessary to justify India becoming a high-income country by 2047.
You're making a very important point there, sir, but I also want to bring your attention to this move, which is expected to boost demand. As you say, the buoyancy will come in. But does this address the enormity of perhaps what some would argue the economic distress at some levels because of job losses, both in terms of tariff situations as well as in terms of the consequence of technology? Do you believe that this needs to be backed by several other measures to make sure that there is an overall, overall address of the economic situation in the country?
So, let me put it this way to you. This GST, about which the Prime Minister spoke in his Independence Day, has been implemented in record time. Not that it happened then, because the Finance Minister very correctly pointed out that this is not a response to what has happened in the US tariff situation. The work on this has been going on for a year and a half with considerable amount of due diligence. Several committees and subcommittees of the GST Council had gone into it with greater granularity. And then this was the opportune moment following the Prime Minister's announcement to lay out this. Now, this does not mean that there won't be other reform measures which will be growth enhancing, along with this far-reaching reform of the GST. This is a very, very robust action, but this is not the end of the action. The Prime Minister has set up several task forces. He has set up several groups. Action is taking place at multiple levels, which will further catalyze this great benefit which is going to come to an average person on account of what has happened yesterday.
Right. Mr. Singh, I'm going to ask you a very basic question. Can the lower GST on essentials meaningfully bring down inflation for ordinary households, increasing savings in a simple way, in a significant way? Because we're talking about essentials like hair oil, shampoo, paneer, notebooks. But is the inflation or is the saving going to go up in a significant way?
Let me put it this way to you, that one can be a devil's advocate by being extra cautious in assuming that there is zero price elasticity of demand. But experience and economic experience suggests that when cost comes down, income goes up, that instead of merely having all the savings, we'll also put a reasonable part of it in enhanced consumption from where the growth multiplier begins. And that is really the recurring benefit of the dynamic story as this evolves further.
Important points that you're making there. Thanks very much there, Mr. NK Singh, for taking time out and decoding what's been touted as a major move, a big Diwali boost for the economy ahead of the festive season. Thanks very much for joining us.